The adulation for Brian Laudrup wasn't limited to the Rangers' support. The Scottish media had no choice but to lavish praise on a foreign import, the likes of which they had never seen before in their game. Saturday evening radio ran out of superlatives. In December, the Sunday Mail likened him to the best type of Power Ranger, which of course the number one toy at Christmas that year. And then later in the season, STV's Jim White delivered a line in a television interview on the prompting of his director to truncate the original question that created a lifetime of fawning, sycophantic parody. The first part of the question is almost entirely forgotten, but provides a bit more context that makes more sense. What can you say to up-and-coming youngsters, Brian? Everyone wants to know about your appetite for the game and the skill factor. White started out before going on to finish by saying, "How come you're so good?" The ultimate softball, perhaps, but it rather summed up the general reception for a player who appeared to have arrived from space, but who, in his skill and grace, had hints of what Scotland felt it once used to provide, the skillful individual who played with carefree abandon. This week we'll be talking about Laudrup and other things, as we often do in 94-95. Good evening, Andrew. How are we?
I'm good, man. Glad to be back on.
Good stuff. And John, how are we doing?
I'm doing well. Yes, let's get this one over with.
That's the spirit. Like, it's a very introspective. It will be a very introspective episode, and it's deliberately so. The amount of match reports, the amount of opinion pieces, when I was doing the newspaper trawl around this time, are full of self-reflection, self-doubt. What is the point of Scottish football? This is garbage we're serving up. This can't continue, and it's highlighted by a couple of things we'll talk about on the show tonight. Not everyone was a fan, of course. That is Scottish football, of course. One letter to the Herald in January asked if the media could possibly water down their adulation of Brian Laudrup just a little. This constant and extravagant eulogising of his talent simply focuses unwelcome attention on how our own low level of attainment, and we are already too well aware of our deficiencies in this area. The man is unquestionably gifted, but as he continues to prance and cavort amongst the ranks of the inept, let it be recognised that while his game may be on a higher plane, he is not from another planet. His medals, his achievements before coming to govern may well be testament to achievement at a higher level. In fact, he would go on to win the Golden Ball in 1995 at what became known as the FIFA Confederations Cup. Denmark defeated Argentina in the final. I did not know that. But Andy, there's maybe a grain of truth in that kind of more curmudgeonly appraisal. Laudrup had already by this point turned down a move to Barcelona, effectively to replace his brother, and he did so without kind of any consideration, really. He met Walter Smith at what's now the Crown Plaza in Glasgow, just on the banks of the Clyde. Smith kind of amazed, so you prefer to play against Falkirk on Tuesday night than go to Barcelona? Absolutely. He was kind of here for the easy life, wasn't he?
So he was and he wasn't, and I've got to be careful that it's not my bias here, but there is a bit of me that thinks that a lot of this chat, both for Laudrup and the fact that it, in inverted commas, it's too easy for Rangers, what's the point, was because it was Rangers that were benefiting for Laudrup and benefiting for the state of the league. Because I don't think we hear these kind of things when our brothers from the East are sitting top of the league and players like Moravchik are mildly entertaining, you know, they get eulogised. So with Laudrup, you could level a lack of ambition for staying in Scotland when you've got Barcelona coming after you. But by the same token, if he wasn't doing it for Denmark, then that argument would be strengthened. Yeah. But he was, and he'd kind of done it before. Folk forget that when he went to Germany as a youngster, he was the brightest thing in Europe and massive expectations. And you could argue he never fulfilled it, but eventually he did, because he won a European Championship with Denmark. He played a major part in AC Milan's run to the Champions League final and one of their best ever teams in their history. And then, you know, the Confederation Cup, nuggets like that speak to a consistency against the top level that you can't really deny. So I think a lot of it was the fact that it was Rangers and it was Laudrup, and the outwards looking in, you know, they knew it was unimpeachable, it was unarguable what a talent he was. And you always try to cut the legs for it. because that's Scotland.
Well, indeed. I mean, in Brian's defence, he would always say that he was having football freedom for the first time in his life, and he loved it, and he wouldn't give that up. He could be anywhere on the field he wished to be. He was given that kind of licence. John, as I said, not everyone was a fan. The arch critic of Ibrox, I don't think there was a bigger critic, even bigger than Jerry McNee at the time, than Ian Archer. In one of his columns in December '94, he actually devoted most of the piece to praising Laudrup, and it was great for Rangers, great for the Scottish game to see someone with this talent play week in, week out. But he finished with a very telling conclusion. Still, he said, it would be nice to see some hulking defender dump him in a heap before the season is finished. That's part of our game too. And it was part of the game, but I'm not sure just how comfortable the Scottish public were about the reality. I think that's starting to change now. There's an increasing insecurity about that. When you've got one of the most prominent football writers pretty much advocating violence as a way to match, sporting artistry, I think it's maybe one example of that deepening sense of insecurity and increasing isolation. It reminded me a wee bit of what we'd get years later with Andy Gray and that famous, messy could he cut it in a wet and wild windy night in Stoke. And it's saying the same thing. Your skill level's all well and good, but we have a culture and a climate that can bring you down to our level. And then on December the 10th, when Rangers went to Kilmarnock, we even that glimmer of hope disappeared. Jim Trainor's report. The thing about these foreigners is this: they're all right with their slick tricks and fancy skills when they've a bit of sunshine in a nice park. Wait till they get into Rugby Park on a dreich-soaking December afternoon. Then we'll see. We did too. And what did we get? We got slick tricks and fancy skills. For so many years we've managed to kid ourselves that the inadequacies of our own lot are as much down to the kind of weather and surfaces that they have to tackle on a typical Scottish winter. When we play summer football, things will be different. Well, it was a comforting argument, but it holds as much water as the marvellous Kilmarnock pitch did on Saturday. Brian Laudrup splashed through it with wonderful control, breathtaking skill, and enough strength to last the day. This tension, we've talked about it in other shows, I think, before, John, between, brain and brawn. Skill and muscle, and I thought it was just kind of perfectly distilled there with Archer's column and what happened at Rugby Park literally the next week.
Yeah, I think it's the whole problem with Scottish football, even up until today, in many ways. But people confuse, would you say, brawn with kicking people, or a will to win with kicking people. When in fact it's you have to have skill, but you have to have a bit of heart. But it doesn't mean that you go about trying to inflict physical damage on players of far superiority. And I don't think we've ever really get rid of that in Scottish football either, in terms of the players or indeed in terms of how referees referee the game. There is that sort of, well, just give him a kick. Who was it? I can't even read that many sort of low knees. Remember the fancy tricks was against Allo or something years later?
Oh, is that Nathan Ottawa?
Yeah.
He was a disgrace for doing it.
It was still there. Yeah, it was a disgrace. How can you do that? And you're thinking, yeah, that doesn't work. I mean, it just doesn't. But and this is what I think's wrong with Scottish football. You've got to have brawn. Not brawn. You don't have to have brawn. You have to have a bit of heart. And Laudrup did have a bit of heart. Indeed, most of the successful, skillful players had a will to win.
Yeah.
Who wanted to do it to go out.
And they also needed to know. They also knew that they had to ride the tackles. He knew exactly what he was going to come up against, and only very, very rarely would you see Laudrup lose his rag at a challenge. He would dust himself down and just take it, because as David talked about last week, he's over 6 foot and he's built. You forget just how well Laudrup was built, but they're prepared to put up with that, but take on or meet that with their own, seemingly space age technique. I'm interested in both of your recollections here about this mid-90s. Scottish football seemed on the couch at this time. I had a vague recollection that it was like this. I had no idea just how many opinion pieces there were, how many match reports there were, that just were so introspective and so self-critical. Do you remember it being as acute as that Laudrup, and we'll talk about one other thing in a moment, that really shone a light onto these inadequacies, and why aren't we producing players like this anymore? Whether us, Andy?
I do. It speaks to what I was talking about earlier on about the fact that I think folk were fed up with Rangers being so dominant. There's a title for a programme for you,
Sounds good,
Martyn, but there was that was what was annoying people, I think, underneath. So you had a lot of opinion pieces, and there weren't many friends of Rangers within that. But beyond that, the national team was going backwards. Most of the best players we had were foreigners in the league. Laudrup was obviously leading the way there. Rangers, by and large, were looking, across the continent as opposed to inward in terms of talent. And the thing is, Charlie Miller, when we're talking about talent coming through in Scotland, I'm racking my brains here of who was the golden talent at that point in terms of youth, Scottish youth, and it was Charlie Miller. And I can't really think of anybody else. You mean Ian Jess was a bit long in the tooth, but then
Ian Jess had a dreadful season. He was really toiling. Who else have you got? Andy McLaren, maybe at Dundee United.
Andy McLaren,
but he was a whippet. I mean, he was just very quick. Neil McCann's probably too young at Dundee at this point in time. I don't even know if he was at Dundee.
I mean, Duncan Ferguson.
Yeah, well, of course.
Duncan Ferguson, Charlie Miller are the only two notable ones that I can think of that were at that time you looked as being, potentially being Scotland greats, if you wanted to put it that way. So, there was a lot of introspection. The product wasn't good. Even us as a top team, we'll hear the word turgid in this episode, I'm sure, a few times. It wasn't conducive to a bright outlook.
John, your recollections on this self-analysis?
I kind of switched off, and I forgot a lot about this season, I've got to be honest. But there wasn't even a disguised jealousy. Andy was right. Then you have the proof of shall we say, the last 10 years in terms of, is one team dominating Scottish football good or bad for Scottish football? And in the mid-90s, we were bad for Scottish football. And we were the cause of everybody else being absolutely awful and on all levels. And there's not a lot happening. I think almost that Laudrup appearing makes it even worse, because if everybody's the same, then it's like, but the fact is, you get this guy. When you look at, how Rangers and all their injuries, just wins the league on his own, playing what would appear to be out his skin, but nobody plays out his skin every week, but just being able to shine, bring pleasure. I mean, this is the only thing you remember. And he got praise, but it was kind of, as you say, half-hearted, kind of, it's because everybody else is awful. And Scottish football is in a really bad place at this point. I always thought that it was Cavalier Celts this season, and actually they are dreadful.
Oh my word!
How they beat us twice and took more points off us than them, I have no idea. They are the best defence in the league, but they are the lowest scorers in the league, and they go a period, I was looking up just before the players on New Year's Day, 11 games with 8 draws and 3 defeats. They are dreadful. And I always thought Tommy Burns, Cavalier himself, everybody else is awful. Generally, apart from, I'd say, Motherwell.
Well, what a bright spark in it. Do you think that's a release?
Decent. Yeah,
a release from Tommy McLean's grip, do you think? Alex McLeish being
I
a...
think it's also big McLeish. I think that there is that sort of being released to go out and play football. But I think actually McLeish is a decent manager. And I think it's probably his first appointment.
Yeah, he's player manager.
But all the usual suspects are dreadful. Hearts are near. I mean, you look at what the league table at the end up. The United get down. Aberdeen, if we'd done the business, would have went down instead. Hearts aren't that great. I mean, the only reason Falkirk aren't above Celtic in the league is because Celtic takes 7 points off us. It really is. There is nothing there, as you say. Scottish national team's not great. I mean, we win the league in a canter, despite, I think we would all say, probably the poorest season at this point in terms of, excitement. There's no cups. There's no Europe. We didn't get a striker, and yet we're the top scorer. We don't have a striker for long periods, and yet we all remember. I think the only thing we all remember of this season is Brian.
Yeah, and he misses two.
Truly magnificent.
He misses 2 league games, 1 for international duty. So again, well, the narrative around Rangers has kind of fallen to bits, and run into the ground. He does look superhuman compared to the opposition, and even compared to his teammates, because he's always there. And you're right, John. He might put in a 6 or a 7, but he'll do something that will change the game. He seems always involved in goals. And I think that letter to the Herald, someone that lived in Arran actually, was like, can you just stop going on about him, because he's making us feel worse. He's shining that light on to what. The other thing that was making us feel worse, perhaps, was this increase in live television. The Champions League now a fixture, and the greatest league in the world on a Sunday. Not England, it was Italy. England wanted to be, but Manchester United's 4-0 humiliation in Barcelona in the Champions League in November was maybe a reminder that they weren't there in terms of quality, but in terms of drama, entertainment, they maybe were, 2 seasons now of this kind of saturated coverage, Scottish football fans, whether they were enjoying the live Sky stuff or the revitalised highlights package Match of the Day on BBC on a Saturday night, they struggled not to be drawn into this weekly soap opera. It too had a reawakened sleeping giant, of course, in Manchester United, and as its dominant force, but unlike Rangers, United had some genuine competition. So the glory hunters could root for Fergie's boys or everyone else get behind some of the exciting challenges, whether that's Keegan's Newcastle United or Kenny Dalglish's Blackburn Rovers. But it was becoming impossible to stay ambivalent, especially when that season turned on its axis on the evening of Wednesday 25th of January 1995, when Eric Cantona launched himself into the Crystal Palace support with that outstretched leg. That event, the subsequent ban, provided a huge twist on a brilliant title race. It went right down to the wire, right down to the final day, and we saw United briefly knocked off their perch by Dalglish. And Scotland, they lacked the drama, the characters, and the quality. Rangers beat Hearts 1-0 at Ibrox on the 21st of January with no strikers, and after a pretty poor performance really. One Match Report opened up with, "Stop the nonsense now. Just tell Rangers they can keep the Premier Division Championship trophy, but let's hold the ball for a minute. Someone has to take stock of what exactly is going on in our game. Frankly, it's become so one-sided, it's embarrassing. Nothing, absolutely nothing, any other team can come up with will prevent Rangers from winning their 7th successive title." And the piece ended by saying Rangers supporters might enjoy winning the title all the time, but no one else will, and the game will suffer. Andy, the impact of European football, whether on a Wednesday night or a Sunday afternoon from Channel 4, or this bombardment from the English package. Again, there's lots of their game that resonate, that look a wee bit familiar. The pace, although it's not quite as quick as Scotland, it's still at that point quite up and at 'em. But Sky were selling something bigger. They were selling a drama, and they had goodies and baddies, and they had players that were prepared to kind of step into those roles, and it just looked like a different package altogether. for Scottish football fans as a whole, not just us.
Aye, and to be honest, man, that may have been a lot of where the introspection was coming from, because, you know, the English League was never at our peers, but there was always a correlation of sorts, wasn't there? And certainly Rangers had, as we've spoken about ad nauseum on this programme, 92, 93, around about then, we were, and before, we were the biggest club in Britain and consider ourselves rightly so. And it's not really until I started, you know, researching for the likes of this programme here that I didn't realise how quickly they ran away from us, because, as you say, that product was taking shape really, really quickly, and it was reflected in transfer fees, and already we can see we're getting left behind. I don't think we realised that at the time. I think we probably sensed that things were changing, but probably not at the pace that we can see now, looking back retrospectively. And you're right, the Sky Revolution was in full flow. It was aided and abetted by, as you say, tremendous characters. I mean, Cantona's influence on what happened in the early years of the Premier League can never be understated. And also the resurgence of a powerhouse in Man United as well. And we're kind of caught in a slipstream. And you know, that might be, you might have hit something there that when we're looking at ourselves and thinking, you know, why are we so rubbish? Why is the league so poor? Why do Rangers dominate without actually having to try a leg? And now beamed into our living rooms more than once a week was this product that, you know, it was alluring. I used to go, I didn't have Sky at that time in my house as a kid, but we used to make a point of going up to my pals every Monday night for Monday Night Football. It was an event, and we'd sit and watch it, and we'd be glued to it. So, the times were a-changing.
John, were you captivated by Blackburn Rovers and the SAS and all of that season? You must have been captivated by something, and presume you were watching football somewhere.
I was watching a bit. Not really a football fan, as I said before. It's Rangers. And I was struggling that season because I don't like Ferguson. I don't like Dalglish. So it was one of those where I was hoping that Newcastle were going to come from somewhere, but it was unavoidable. It wasn't even watching it. It was, as you say, it was theatre. It was drama. It was all of these things that Scottish football wasn't. The guy, it might have been facetious. We're going to talk, actually, we've talked in previous episodes about either crises or a lot of glory and, you know, special things. There is more than an inevitability that we're winning this league from, okay, you might say day one, but we don't get to the bells and we've won it. There is no theatre, there is no drama, there is nothing, and there's not even... You get Motherwell, but they don't really... They're a good team, but they don't really have great players or players coming through young or whatever. There's a flatness, whereas in England, you do have Shearer turning on, Sutton's, you know, turning up. You've got the whole drama about, which I don't think any of us could understand. This is when Andy Cole goes from one title rival to another. And you're thinking, well, how can it... What is Keegan up to? You know, so there's so many subplots, and it's not the... I mean, Liverpool have really talked about at this point, who were the dominant team for the previous 2 decades. Everton have kind of disappeared as well, who were the 80s team. Arsenal aren't really there, so there's a lot of freshness. Yeah, there is a bit of European football. I think for us, the problem is we were there 2 years before, and since then haven't been. And there is a... God, this was what took away the turgidness. But, I mean, the Premier League, it just is drama, the way it's packaged, in a way that you couldn't, at this point, package Scottish football, because there is no old firm rivalry. Because, okay, they're doing it, but it's almost the equivalent of Hamilton putting us out of Scottish Cup. They are so far behind, they're coming. You can see it with the money they're raising, etc. But they are miles. You can't make an old firm rivalry. Suddenly, the new firm have disappeared. The animosity between us and Aberdeen is there, but it's not really in terms of, apart from one-off games. There's nothing to say, this team could beat Rangers to the title. There is nobody anywhere saying, well, if they win this or what. And we're not putting together huge runs. We're putting together half-decent runs, but they're nothing special. Yet, in comparison to the rest of the league, it's not. Whereas down south, you've got Cantona, Cole going every day. Almost Ferguson and Dalglish and Keegan are generating headlines. And it just, never mind if you're a football fan or not, it's just box office in many ways, in a way that we can't.
It's there, isn't it?
Is this the season that the Tims don't have a shirt sponsor? Or is it Umbro, or is that... I've got in my mind the mid-90s, they can't even get a shirt sponsor. It might have been one of the seasons before.
I think it was the season before, yeah. I think they've got one by now. But yeah, I do. That away kit, I remember not having a sponsor on it. But right, so England, Serie A a wee bit, sometimes the Wednesday night. Reminders that the Scottish football product is not... what it could be, and for many other than us, and maybe including us in certain cases, dominance was leading to drudgery. How that dominance came about, this inevitability of a seventh successive title, actually was anything but. The 2-1-1 draws against Hearts and Falkirk, and then Rangers did what they'd done so often in the past. They went on a winning streak that destroyed any kind of mirage of a title race. In the previous season, it was a 7-game stretch in February and March that took Rangers from level pegging to 6 points clear, and that was with only 2 points for a win. The introduction of 3 points for a win this season was designed to produce more entertainment and discourage sides from booking in for bed and breakfast when they visited grounds such as Ibrox. But when the champions got into a stride, it made the impact even more explosive. Rangers had a 2-point advantage before struggling Aberdeen visited on Friday the 25th of November. By the time they left Fir Park on Hogmanay, the gap at the top was 10. The league was over before the bells. Let's talk a wee bit about this run then, guys, because I think it is impressive. The Friday night, we played Aberdeen at Ibrox on the Friday night because Ibrox would be used on the Sunday for the Coca-Cola Cup final. Rangers won 1-0. Laudrup involved, of course, with the assist. But it was Ali McCoist who scored the goal. John, Ali's only goal of the season. I sometimes think we forget just how he struggled post-leg break for a couple of years. That famous cup final winner notwithstanding.
Yeah, this has come as a big surprise to me. The fact that he's missed so much over these 2 years. It just didn't register. Must have done at the time, but yeah, and he is a big miss for us. I think in terms of the energy he brings, I think he's a bigger team player than most of his colleagues. In terms of, I don't know what it is, but he's bringing it, and therefore, yeah, it's just astonishing that we're talking about an Ali McCoist's career at Rangers, and suddenly you find there's 2 years, and particularly this season, where he scores 1 goal, and he literally he looks decent against Aberdeen. He looks decent for 40 minutes at Tannadice, and then that's him, pretty much for the season. And it's stunning. And you're looking, I mean, it just generally, when you look at the injuries we had, and I'm sure we've already done ad nauseum what our fitness regime was and whether it contributed or not. I mean, everybody's injured. You watch the end of season video around this time, and if a man's coming on, he's coming back from a 3-4 month break, and if he's getting taken off, he's about to never be seen again for 4 months. And there are lots of them. I mean, it is just unbelievable. And yet Ali's there, he beats Aberdeen. It's only 1-0 against a very poor Aberdeen, but it kicks off, and it just shows you what did we win? 5 games in the bounce, and that's us out of sight.
Yeah.
Other seasons we've had to put 7, 8. This season is just one little nudge in the accelerator, see ya, and everybody's like, oh, where did they go?
Yeah.
And it literally is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The next game was Sunday, the 4th of December, live on STV. Rangers travelled to Tannadice, where Ivan Golic had promised the media that a 4-0 hammering awaited them. Didn't quite turn out like that.
This is Laudrup. Nice first touch from McCoy's to Jury. Houster's in the middle, McCoy's arriving, Laudrup's there as well. Still it's Laudrup. Great skills again by him. Oh, marvellous goal by Laudrup. Fantastic skills from Laudrup. Stepping away from two defenders and sending an unstoppable shot past Callum O'Hanlon. The free kick to Rangers taken by Durant. Oh, Billy's well forward. This is Houstra. Oh, magnificent goal by Peter Houstra. He strikes again after 52 minutes, and another splendid solo goal. Played off by Bowman. Well, there's no doubt that with Rangers' nearest challengers both drawing yesterday, they're doing themselves and their championship hopes a lot of good here this afternoon. That's played through now for Ian Durant. Oh, magnificent! A great pass by Laudrup, and Ian Durant makes it Dundee United 0, Rangers 3. Another delightful pass from Laudrup. Durant running through and picking his spot.
Andy, this was fun. This season hasn't produced many all-round team performances. Brian Laudrup was doing it seemingly every week, but in terms of a Rangers 11 that just clicked, this was maybe as good as the performance at Hampden against Celtic in the November, or sorry, the October. Laudrup's first was just him in a nutshell. I think he starts the move actually before being able to receive the ball over on that left-hand side of the box. He's twisting two players inside out. He curls it past a few more bodies. Houstra gets the second, but it's Laudrup again with just a perfectly weighted pass right onto Durant's feet, and you know that's him underlying his return to the Rangers fold. One Dundee United player had kind of confided in a journalist at the time, I wish he would shut up, all he's doing is making their job harder. Walter Smith won't need to wind Rangers up, our gaffer has done it for him. And you know that Golak shtick was maybe just starting to wear a bit thin. The Rangers fans certainly made Golak very aware of what they thought of him and his predictions, and he would be gone by March. Your memories of this day, because it was a good one.
So, Dundee United could still cause us problems, particularly at Tannadice. So it was still a potential banana skin. But if we start with the Laudrup goal, I sat my nephew doing. My nephew's 10 now, so maybe 2 years ago when he was 8, 9, starting to get into Rangers and serious. I sat him down and gave him the Laudrup lecture and said, "I'm going to show you Brian Laudrup. This is the best player I've ever seen play for Rangers." And that's the goal I started with. The first one I looked for was that goal, because I don't know about you guys, but I was brought up watching snippets. You know, there wasn't wall football, but you got snippets of continental football, and you've seen the best players in the world, like Platini, score seemingly impossible goals, and it was goals like that. And I remember, I don't think I was at this game actually. I don't know why, but I think I watched this one on the TV, and I was utterly mesmerised by that goal, and watched it 100 times after, because it was just beautiful the way he takes it at the edge of the box, you know, a bit of space, but not enough to really do much at that point. He goes the wrong way. He goes to the byline, takes two guys with him, so you think he's closing off the angle to actually score a goal. But as we know, Laudrup's ability to change direction with the ball at his feet was utterly incredible, and he just sidesteps to the right, and he does it. I mean, he hits it hard, but it's not a blast. But he just kind of passes it into the net off the ground, and it's such a beautiful goal, and it sums up his this season. Just something extraordinary that nobody else in the league could even think of doing. And the other two goals. So was it Houstra scored the other one? No.
Yeah, Houstra scored the other one.
That was a peach as well.
Yeah, he kind of got underneath his feet a wee bit, and then he just managed to ping it. And for the amount of backlift he seemed to get, it was a pretty good strike. And you know, Walter did this at Hampden Park, where he used both Laudrup and Houstra, which is a wee bit adventurous for Walter Smith away from home.
Yeah.
And he did that again at Tannadice as well. And so it was, the ball was kind of bobbling about, and it's he did well to get the shot away, but it was struck beautifully. John,
and in Durant, I mean,
sorry,
I was just going to say about that Durant goal. This is post '92, where Durant's renaissance was complete. But much like McCoy's, there was kind of doubts over him. You know, we'd seen the best of him they were playing kind of cameo roles. So a welcome goal to remind us all that he was still a player.
John, did you look up from your paper to enjoy this game?
Oh no, you watch it, you just kind of remember half it. I mean, this is, we talk about the Laudrup goal, but let's face it, we see these moves all season long and love them. I mean, it's just sumptuous in a way that I'm like Andy. I think at this point, and probably even until now, he's the best player I've seen in a Rangers jersey. You're talking about how his speed of movement for a 6 foot plus guy as big as he was. Again, that was stunning. He just had all of these attributes, and it was magnificent. I mean, the weird thing, and I'm sorry to pick on him, but we're talking about Scottish football. Early on, we get a chance with Gordon Jury, and he traps the ball as far as I can kick it.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
and then just after it in the highlights, you get Laudrup sticking in, and that just captures the difference between, shall we say, Scottish football and the rest of the world, because there seems to be Charlie Miller, don't get me wrong, is a magnificent player, and he is at that point where he's a really excellent talent, and which way is he going to go? Because there's all sorts of pressures and how do people develop. But they're really, for the first time, there isn't any generation, any collective of Scottish youngsters coming through. Doesn't mean they all make it or not make it. As we said before, there just is a dearth of talent, and therefore if you're a half-decent player in Scotland, but you can hold a light against Laudrup, and Huster's hitting form now. For the first time since we signed him, suddenly you're thinking, oh, this is brilliant. We've got this one guy will play wherever he likes. We get Huster on the other side. We've suddenly got a bit of balance. We've got pace in the wings. We've got goals coming from, you might call wingers. I don't think you could call Laudrup quintessentially a winger. It's just, it's lovely. I'm always more comfortable at Tannadice because of the early 80s when we could go up there and beat them when they were a decent team. But it was just after the Scottish Cup final and Golach, and it was just to shut them up. And it was just nice to hit a bit of form. Okay, we would beat Celtic, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it wasn't as if we hit the heights after that. It was just turn up and beat this pub team. And suddenly we've done this, and we beat Aberdeen, and we beat Dundee United. Unfortunately, Alec is off injured. But it's beginning, and you just have this reassurance that, okay, it's December, January, February, round about then, we're going to hit a bit of form, this is it. And we also have this guy who's worth turning up and paying the admission for. Him alone, literally, for many, many games that season. Maybe a little bit like Cooper in the early 80s.
Yeah,
where you're going up and you're not seeing it, but he's on another level, I would argue. Sorry if there's people going to say about David Cooper, but no, Laudrup single-handedly wins the league for us this year. He is the difference between us and probably 20 points less.
Yeah,
15 easily.
Well, the next game was his bally in the water at Kilmarnock. Rangers 1-2-1. Alan McLaren scored his first. He scored Rangers first that day. Laudrup actually missed a couple of sitters before he eventually did get his goal. Nice quote from Richard Gough after that game. He's a very special talent. There was I telling our lads to make sure we made no mistakes at the back, to be careful about their passing. And he pads up and starts to run with the ball on that surface. He amazes me. The captain was on the score sheet, as well as Mark Hateley, striking early at home to Hibs on Boxing Day before the trip to Motherwell on the final day of the year. I mean, even pushing the definition of realistically, and they were the only side that could realistically stop Rangers, and McLeish's side needed a win to bring the gap down to 4 points, and they gave a good account of themselves that day. I was there. They pulled the game level early in the second half, but still a long way short on a side, long way short of a side on a mission to put that question to rest as early as they could. Stuart McCall got his first goal of the season. He'd been getting a lot of stick for not scoring. He fancied himself that day, told his pals 28-1, get on it, and he did. Laudrup scored, I think, one of the oddest goals of his career to re-establish that lead very early, or very soon after being pegged back. His shot, not unlike the one at Tannadice from the other side, hits the post, comes back and hits the goalkeeper Stevie Wood and into the net. And yet again, he turns creator, just to be absolutely sure, feeding Jury with the perfect chance to finish the match. And realistically, the title, a big game mentality, Andy, so Alex McLeish described Rangers afterwards, something that he admitted his side lacked. They were the interest that season as a team outside of Laudrup, but they clearly, we see this in sport all the time, there's talent there, there's up and coming energy, but when push comes to shove, you need the big boy pants, and there's only one team that really owned those.
No, Motherwell come out of this season with tremendous credit. It goes a long way to seeing McLeish as the Rangers manager, eventually, because he was doing something that was pretty extraordinary with a provincial team. The Kilmarnock game you speak of is ingrained in my memory, because there's very few games at Rugby Park I go to that I don't remember that game, because just a super factories, all folks, but where the buses park at Rugby Park, there's the river, and that river looks very much different to what it did that day, because they've built flood protection walls there. Because we get back to our bus, we went to go back to our bus after the game. This is how bad the rain was. And the buses had been moved because that entire area was flooded. It was under like 3-4 feet of water at points. And during that game, I mean, we speak earlier on about the curmudgeonly attitude towards Scottish football, and they kind of remain in doubt that Laudrup is just doing it in Scotland because he's playing against detritus. But that day, he proved it was a kind of class. You can't hide class. That was basically what was the bottom line for that game, because the ball wasn't moving. People were trying to pass the ball on that pitch, and Kilmarnock's pitch, as you remember then, wasn't the plastic horror show they've got now. It was one of the best pitches in the league. Consistently, it was a brilliant pitch, and the ball wasn't moving. But here was Laudrup, absolutely dripping wet, to the point where you can probably see through the player's shorts, running with the ball just the same as he usually runs with the ball. It was absolutely astounding. And I remember at the game, because I was there with my dad, undercover, luckily. I think I was in the main stand, but basically the comments that day was, how can he do that? How can he still run with the ball when other players can't pass it? It was utterly incredible.
Because going back to the original topic of discussion, this is the big test for these kind of Johnny Foreigner fancy Dans. They shouldn't be able to do that when it's not a nice balmy mild spring afternoon or whatever. This is supposed to be the leveller, and it wasn't.
No, and the slide tackles are flying in, and Raymond Montgomery, good defender, liked a slide tackle. I remember things like that flying in a wet pitch. It was just gliding. It was otherworldly, and so that was a big win on a banana skin day, because the conditions could have went either way. He was the difference, and as I say, you've summed up the Motherwell game pretty well. But am I right in saying that day, so we didn't have many strikers, and the likes of McCall's playing right back, stuff like that. So it wasn't as if we were at full pelt. We're still a fairly patchwork team at that point, if I recall.
Yes, you recall correctly. We're going through a phase now. We'll come to the injuries in a minute, but we're kind of out of. It was getting a bit silly in terms of the striker cover, but we knew that was a potential problem. And who played that day? Laudrup played, McCall played, Goff, Bowley, Haitley did play. David Robertson Haitley didn't play. Moore, Jury, McLaren, Charlie Miller, and Colin Scott played in goal. So Miller would be getting kind of moved up. Jury would be getting kind of moved inside. He didn't really like playing the centre forward role. He quite enjoyed doing all his work on the channel, but I guess when Brian's there, it doesn't really matter. At the end of season video, Stuart McCall mentions the importance of that win. As I said, 10 points clear on New Year's Eve, game over. And he said because it was New Year's Eve, the celebrations carried on for a few days. Well, he wasn't joking. Rangers played Celtic on the 4th of January. A Celtic team who had they beat Falkirk in Hogmanay, their first league win in 12. as John's kind of mentioned, 3 defeats, 8 draws before that. Rangers go in front. Ian Ferguson, who just come back into the team, scores from close range. But Celtic equalise. Paul Byrne scored again against Rangers, and again a very, very good goal. They could have won it. They should have won it. They were the better team, I think, in the second half. Rangers were abominable. Starting to become maybe a little concerned, a little bit of a concern. John Walter's record at home in the league, anyway, that's 2 seasons without a victory against them. We were appalling that night, actually.
Yeah, my recollection is we were worse than appalling.
Even Brian was on the periphery doing nothing.
Nobody was doing anything. Although if you watch our end of season video, it looks like in the second half we were all over them, which I really don't remember. It was more, I don't let them win. I don't think it was concern per se. I mean, Walter's record at Ibrox against them to this point is dreadful.
Yeah.
I mean,
1-6. No.
Yeah, something like that, and maybe 2, but one of them was a neutral venue, shall we say?
In the league, certainly. In the league, he is 1 win and 8 at home at this point against Celtic as manager,
and yet at Parkhead or away from home, shall we say?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he only loses about 1 game from recollection to this point. I mean, we own them, and I think that's why he gets a little bit of a part, apart from winning the title every year. I mean, we are a generation of fans whereby generally going to their place was, through the 80s, a horror show waiting to happen in various ways, and then suddenly we're just going there and turning them over with a regularity which is phenomenal. I mean, his record at Parkhead must be almost the opposite of what it is at Ibrox, but you just want to stuff them because they aren't a good team. I mean, you go, and this is where this whole mythology about the Cavaliers, it's because they turn up like 4 times a year because we are they get 2 cup finals this season, but this is the first time in a while. Generally, we are the only game they have. It is a really weird, but we were dreadful that night. And when McCall said, it being the new year, and this was played in a weird day, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'll come to that. It was a Wednesday.
I remember it was.
We'll come to why in a moment because I'll keep that back. But it is poor. If Rangers going on the run that just does the job is becoming consistent, then their next little trait is becoming quite familiar as well, which is an injury hit period of easing up once that hard work has been done. Andy Gorham was injured playing for Scotland and Greece just before Christmas. He was rushed back. That ended in disaster at Firhill on the 7th of January. Went down, wouldn't be seen again for the season. He was replaced by Colin Scott and Ali Maxwell, and then later on by veteran goalkeeper Billy Thompson. McCoist, you've mentioned, John suffered similar injury setbacks both at home and away to Dundee United. He wouldn't start a game post-December. And even last season's warhorse, Mark Hateley, played only 1 game between Hogmanay and April Fool's Day because of, I quote, an untreatable deep-lying pelvic injury. I'll leave that there. This meant the Rangers played a couple of matches in January, February without a recognised striker. Had to use Jury and Laudrup centrally when they preferred maybe just to play a little wider. Charlie Miller and Neil Murray were sent out to do some kind of Rangers outreach programme stuff just before Christmas, speaking to school kids on the AstroTurf across from the main stand. One young boy asked what it was like playing up front for Rangers. He said, "I'm not playing up front, I'm playing in midfield." He may have been at the time, but it wouldn't be long before he too was asked to do that shift in an unusual position for the remainder of the season. Miller was very highly rated, and Craig Moore as well. I mean, these are 18 and 19 years of age respectively when the season began. We know Brian Laudrup overshadows this season for understandable reasons, but I think the contribution of those two, especially playing in a variety of positions, shouldn't be forgotten. We haven't really produced, that 92-93 crop that showed something. Obviously, Gary McSwiggan, Stephen Presley, Neil Murray, hadn't really kicked on. Murray still kind of clinging on to his Ibrox future. But Miller and Moore, they're popping up with goals as well. You know, Moore scored at Pittodrie earlier in the season. You forget just how young they were.
So there was valid criticism around that time of the youth policy at Rangers, and by youth policy I mean the actual, not just playing them in the first team, but the production. There wasn't enough of them getting to the point where they could be considered for the first team. And Miller and Moore were the exception, because Neil Murray's a good example. He'd come through, played in the 92 team. He never really struck me as being good enough to be a Rangers player long term. He was a bit part player, and I think what you see with him was what you got, and he was never going to get any better, if that makes sense. So it was a kind of underwhelming breakthrough. If that sounds a wee bit cruel, but that's what I always viewed him as. And McSwegen was much more the same. He, great goal scorer in the reserve leagues and youth leagues, and he came through and never really looked as if he was going to be credible enough to be a first team player with Rangers. But Moore and Miller were different. Miller, there was a bit of mythology around him, because you'd heard him spoken about in hushed terms about this boy we've got, Charlie Miller, and he made his. Was it this year or the year before he made his debut? Probably this year. He made his debut at Pittodrie.
No, Smith threw him in the season before we lost 2-0 when Duncan Ferguson was he was getting criticism for playing Ferguson and Paisley, and he was chopping and changing, and he chucked Miller in, who's only 17 at this point, and we get beat 2-0, and Smith took a lot of criticism that day for throwing Miller in such a game, but Haitley says in his book that Miller's the best player I've ever seen at that age, bearing in mind I'd worked with Paolo Maldini when he was 16. That shows how highly I rated Charlie. Maybe over the course of the next season's shows we'll maybe have a conversation about why Miller didn't quite develop, but there's a lot of brightness.
There was a £30,000 fee to him for his making his Rangers debut. There was stuff like that, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of mythology. It was something different. And Moore came through the Australian Institute of Sport, or whatever it was called, and came with a kind of glowing reputation. But what's for going with Moore is he did his hard yards under Walter Smith. I remember playing right midfield at Parkhead one game.
Played
everyone. It was 93, and he was quite an adaptable player. He played in midfield. He played a kind of holding midfielder, but he was obviously a centre half. Played right back.
Yeah, right back.
So they two boys contributed this season 100%, and especially when you consider that the injuries we had, there wasn't a bleeding in period. It wasn't as if you could come in and see how they could do and
which Smith,
take a chance because you knew you weren't going to lose. They were coming into games that they needed to win.
And Smith was quite frustrated by that, because ideally Charlie Miller would not be playing every week. Charlie Miller is playing every week, which at that age we know now, and we still have players, whipped and kind of run into the ground before they're ready. But Smith had no other option, and the boy was delivering. He was doing a job, and he had no other players from which to call upon. He did receive a couple of further reinforcements. Gary Boland and Alec Cleland coming for $750,000, released from their contract hell at Dundee United. I think Gary Boland had taken Dundee United to court over the legality of Jim McLean's contract duration. It's becoming a bit of a running joke in Scottish football. This provides Smith with a bit more defensive cover, but it's the blunt edge and attack guys that is the problem. In early 95, Rangers managed only 4 wins in the first 3 months of that year. One of those was a 3-1 win over lower league Hamilton in the Scottish Cup third round. You get 5 draws, 3 league defeats. Incredibly, that did not only do no harm to the title challenge, the lead was actually increased by 12 points by the end of March. One of the wins was that 1-0 win against Hearts we talked about earlier, the Charlie Miller goal very early on. There was a comfortable 3-0 win at home to Kilmarnock on the 25th of February, but the other win was a wee bit more notable. Rangers came from 2-1 down to beat Falkirk at Brockville on the 14th of January without Laudrup, who's on international duty, or Goram, Goff, Bowley, Mikhailichenko, Haitley and McCoist. And it was Peter Hoostra who started the comeback with a fine goal, his second of the game, and it was his last before moving to Japan, to Hiroshima at the end of the month. And Stuart McCall, who was available and ready to pounce in the final seconds to grab the win. And John, show a wee bit of that old muscle memory and nerve to collect full points when even the maestro wasn't there. We did have a lot of drama on the pitch in this season, not a lot of late finishes to games. This might be the only one, I don't know. But there was a bit of a throwback to, that 92-93 team and David Robertson still speaks about this, that this was really born in that semi-final at Hampden against Celtic, that they would never panic, and we quote this day quite often, as even at 2-1 down, they felt they would win. There was a bit of excitement for us.
No, it was one of the better games that season. It's apart from, you can remember Old Firm games, good or bad, but I mean there in Tannadice, I would say, were the two standout games, and there weren't many standout games. Houston had a really good game, but he had a really good run around this point. Generally, he was playing regular in the team. I don't know where he got confident. He always seemed to be a player that Walter didn't trust. If there was a big game, or he might be in the bench, or he might not even make the bench. Because he's been there a number of years, but I don't think Walter ever trust him. But at this point, so it's Law, just as he's hitting a bit of form, it's when he's leaving. But this was a really good game. Falkirk were a decent team at this point. They were no worse than many others. In fact, they were pretty much better than many others. I think they finished fifth that season. And Brockville was one of those old-fashioned type pitches where, you get 10, 15,000 in and there was a bit of noise. And it brought a bit of excitement, which had probably been missing for quite a bit of the season. Either we were stuttering or we were winning easily. And this was one of the games where we turn on a bit of style. We show a bit of the muscle memory, whatever you want to do. It's a comeback win. And it's a comeback win, I would say, playing relatively well, given it's January at Brockville. And you just give the title today, and then that'll do us. We'll see you next season. When we get everybody fit, please.
That's pretty much what everyone was saying. 16 drop points, though, in that time demonstrates obviously Rangers were not quite the well-oiled machine, but as you've mentioned, John, that paucity of the rest of the league ensured that we'd still be an unstoppable force over the course of the season. There were stumbles, of course. Aberdeen, they'd sacked Willie Miller by this point, replaced them with Roy Aitken. They started that new era by beating us 2-0 at Pittodrie on the 12th of February. 2 points off the bottom of the league, Aberdeen were at the time. Very disappointing defeat, regardless of the historical danger that ground possessed. Smith was furious. The Rangers had 2 excellent penalty claims turned down. Referee Jim McCluskey conceded later in the week that he was wrong on both counts. But Aberdeen, to be fair, they just had more about them, maybe more hunger given their situation, as did Hearts at Tynecastle on the 18th of March when they deservedly won 2-1. Laudrup's goal that day, if it was anything but a consolation goal, or anything other than a consolation goal, it would be talking about that, Andy. You'd be showing your nephew that one. It is a brilliant goal, but it meant nothing. It just got Rangers kind of back into the game. But it was Hearts' victory there over Rangers a month previously that provided the biggest gut punch since August. Scottish Cup 4th round tie, played on the Monday evening live on Sky, and sadly it had too much in common with the previous season's final, with Maxwell at fault for 2 of the Hearts goals before the break, the latter coming as a result of the pass back to his feet where he panicked. He just kind of picked it up. The free kick then led to a corner from which McPherson scored. Rangers responded well though. We were level within a few minutes of the second half starting. 2 quick goals, Laudrup and Jury, and most expected the Rangers win, but the old frailties returned. Jim Bett's shot from the edge of the box was accurate, but I wouldn't say overly powerful, and Maxwell could only parry out straight to the feet of John Robertson, and a 4th on the breakaway simply rubbed it in. John, first time in 5 years we'd have to make do with only the league title. What a strange kind of game. As I said, some old frailties there, and some kind of renewed quality. It was an odd one. Yeah, it was. I think when you get 2 down and then you come back to 2-2 with this team, you think the worst you're getting is probably would go to a replay in those days, wouldn't it? It would be a replay. Yeah. I mean, psychologically, you're there. To lose late goals, I mean, that just doesn't happen to us in these kind of circumstances. I mean,
when was the last cup fight? Having lost to Falkirk and then losing to this. I mean, this doesn't happen to us, and this feels the flattest time. I mean, when would the time before that we only won one trophy? That would be when we signed
89-90. It was 89-90. Yeah, I just remember that Monday night feeling. Oh.
So even in those days, even in that sort of thing, we still had, and we could wind up the pins and Mo scored and all of that, and it was.
But you still got a title to win.
A lot more exciting.
You've got a title that's still going down to April. You know what I mean? This is February, and I remember like, well, this is us then. It's dark.
Falkirk, Brockville, that's it. Give it a hoot.
Yeah.
And this is a Hearts team who aren't that great. Yeah. I mean, you look at the league table, because everybody assumes, because we've been talking about Hearts being a decent team, Aberdeen being a decent team, but the league title this year, or the league table, Hearts aren't that great. Aberdeen aren't that great. We should have relegated Aberdeen. Hearts finished with 43 points. Aberdeen have got 41 and Dundee United 36. If we stuff Aberdeen as we should have done, we could have relegated them, which would have made the season even better. I mean, you don't like to laugh at other people's miseries, but, a Willie Miller, Roy Aitken combo taking them down would have been delightful. But I don't know what was missing. I mean, I do remember the other game at Tynecastle, driving back down the road because I was in England, and I was just mesmerised by Laudrup's goal that day, which I know we lost 2-1, but it was out of this world. But this game, you come back to 2 each, and you think, as I said, we aren't losing this now, because we don't until this point. If we get beat, we're usually well beat, or it's a nothing game or a last minute winner, usually for the Tims, that actually means nothing. We don't lose tight games against Scottish opposition. It just doesn't really happen. People might win 1-0, whatever. But you go to 2-0, I mean, the defence is all low. I mean, we talk about Maxwell, the defence is nowhere that night.
No, it's just poor.
On anything. I mean, it's just generally poor. But it's 2 each. Jury scores. Probably both of them. I don't know if Laudrup probably wouldn't claim the first one. But...
he was on the verge of I don't know how that wasn't offside, to be honest, but it seemed kind of in the balance. And I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know if you were. And Tynecastle again. Davey, Allen, and I spoke last week that the mid-90s just characterised by scaffolding in football, and there's work being done at all grounds, and we're going to get a bit of that at Ibrox next season with the corners and whatever. But I think I watched it on the telly, and just this, it was a gut punch. The earlier stuff of the season was it was hard to take that week from hell, but it's August, still got a league title to win. We expect to win it, but still needs to be done. And another cup. We've been in 3 cup finals in a row, Scottish Cup finals in a row. The season before, where we weren't at the league championship, went down to the last day. This is February the 20th, and the season's over. And that just felt like a weird sense of deflation.
But probably because it was confirming what we knew, that over the course of the league, we had enough to get by, but we were always susceptible on a one-off game because, between injuries, form, and just the kind of lacklustre approach at times that we had, these things could happen. And it was demonstrated in the Champions League, League Cup, and the Scottish Cup. We were found sorely lacking. I don't have many recollections of this game. I've got to be honest with you. But yeah, it was deflating. I noticed in the end of the season video that Watersmith talks around this time of, it's a pity we didn't have Europe because everything's just bedding in now. In February,
I know.
I mean, we're recording this in September 2022 and we're talking about our team should have bedded in by now and lamenting that fact. This is February and he's saying that's just getting bedded in. Jesus. So I think it just kind of summed up where we were at this season. We could be great, but more often than not, we were somewhere in between, and we were really just getting by.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair enough. I did watch the whole games on YouTube, and yeah, a disappointing night for us. A much needed excellent night, I guess, for the rest of Scottish football. Not just in terms of the result. I don't think there'll be many non-Rangers fans losing too much sleep over Rangers being knocked out, but it was a real ding-dong cup game. It was good fun entertainment in a season that wasn't exactly providing a lot of that. And the wider viewing public was becoming even more important. More often at home, consuming their football at their convenience. As work and lifestyle patterns began to change. And maybe this was a big significant factor behind that inward sense of self-doubt that we were talking about. And that New Year Old Firm game barely merited the traditional name, moved as it was at the behest of Sky to the 4th of January. Sky only had 2 sports channels in those days, and Sky Sports 2 wasn't used all the time. So the North London derby took precedence over the Glasgow one, over that traditional 2nd of January slot, and then both Manchester United v Coventry and QPR v Chelsea were felt to be more attractive to the broadcaster on the 3rd. And this caused a lot of uproar. At the time, one prominent Rangers fan was concerned that the time may soon be upon us whereby Rangers would be on live television up to 8 times a season. Can you imagine? And amongst the hysteria of that particular fanzine piece was a salient point that any local support many teams have left will be eaten into as kids identify more with the teams which appear regularly on TV. TV appearance money will concentrate in fewer hands, making it even more difficult for other clubs to compete. Now, what was happening internally in Scotland was replicated in the wider picture outside. Not only was television coverage highlighting the difference in quality and entertainment as a product, it was creating a difference in finance. Tommy Burns was beside himself with excitement as Celtic, boosted by the upcoming share issue that would raise around £13 million, he managed to do a deal for just over £1 million for the Dutch striker Pierre van Hooijdonk. This was in mid-January. In the same week, Manchester United spent £7 million on Andy Cole. Rangers had barely managed to spend that over 5 players that season, and the prospect of even us, the country's biggest club, investing that kind of money in one asset, John, was unthinkable. So in more ways than one, just over a year from Rangers breaking and holding that British transfer record, England was very much now a different league. I do remember as a 14-year-old kid taken aback by the Cole transfer anyway, because it was Newcastle selling to Manchester United. What's going on? But the money for one player, we aren't doing that, and this is just becoming a different ballgame.
Yeah, I think Andy alluded to it, and I certainly didn't realise at the time, but yeah, everything is changing. I remember 7 million, on the 2 things. Why would you let him go to a rival? But on the other hand, thinking 7 million, who pays that for a player? In many ways, but that was just the start. And yeah, the divergence between, shall we say, finances, quality, probably in Scottish football and English football. This is where it all gets. Always the divergent paths are going in very different directions. Yeah.
Quick word, Andy, or both of you actually. The joke was Celtic were wanting a big name centre forward, what they didn't mean by the letter. But spending over £1 million on a player, they'd done that previously, I think. But the share issue and that revenue, obviously a lot of it was going to go in the much needed redevelopment. But I've asked this question before to you guys: is now the time where you start thinking, right, they are kind of getting their shit together?
I think that was, any fair-minded person knew that things were changing at Parkhead, because you could say what you wanted about Fergus McCann, but there was a plan, whereas before there wasn't even a plan. So you knew that they were so far behind because there wasn't even a plan of recovery. they knew that they had that. Now, the share issue was obviously significant. I mean, it's significant nowadays when you think about our share issues in recent years for amongst fans. And it was going to give them an injection. And Van Hooijdonk, and I say, I don't think there was many people had heard of him. But even the thought of them saying, I mean, he was 6'6", 6'7". He was absolutely huge. He came with a big reputation. It was a kind of sign of intent because it was a different type of signing as to what they'd had before. Burns' football obviously lent itself to a perception of, I mean, John mentioned Cavalier football earlier on. I think we knew he was going to be attacking football. So you knew that things were going to get harder for us because we've spoke ad nauseam in this very episode about just doing enough to get by. The reason they could do that and have poor results against Celtic, for example, was because they were so bad. And there was often, a kind of logical thought that if they could get their act together against the Diddy teams, for lack of a better phrase, that they would maybe have a shout. That's certainly what they were thinking amongst my Celtic supporting pals at school. That was the thought process. So I think we knew that we were going to have to up our game and things were changing across the city.
Dermot Desmond underwrote that share issue and he put 2-3 million of his own money in as well. John, can you remember that being a name that not quite struck fear, but at least raised awareness?
I don't remember the name. What I do remember is a grudging respect for, and actually regret, about McCann, who was a bit of a ridiculous character, if you like, visually and also with the accent.
Yeah.
But it was a very unselfish, it was a very actual Rangers Calvinist approach of the 5-year plan and putting the money in, and in 5 years I will give you X, Y, and Z, and I'm off with, and I'm going to make I'm going to make money out of it. I would have much preferred if the old board or a Tommy Burns-like character who were all emotional, all about Raselic and doing it that, in a Celtic way, Celtic-minded and all of this. I didn't like, and I think actually in many ways they retained that for a number of years. They were like the Presbyterian bank manager, and it was a real capitalist approach, which I kind of hope their fans would hound them out sooner because he wasn't a Celtic man through and through. But I mean, you look at what he said he was going to do, and you look at what happened, and then he did everything. There was a respect, and you are thinking they're getting money. You're seeing the rest of Scottish football is on the wane, so even by being less bad, they're going to be number 2. It is that obvious that it's going to happen. I think Burns gives us a degree of optimism, in all honesty, because he's not pragmatic, as you coined the phrase, and we'll talk about it in a future Cup semi-final. But it does. They've hit the bottom, and they're coming up. And the worst thing I do recall when we get put out by Hearts in the Scottish Cup was they could win the Scottish Cup.
Yeah.
And the longer they went without winning a trophy, the better it is, because it becomes a thing. And I really didn't want them to break their duck, and you knew that we would beat them in the Cup. Even then, I would have fancied this. It would have been Hampden, wouldn't it, if they'd have drawn us at home. You couldn't really see anybody else beating them. I know Wraith Rovers had done it, but
yeah, the chances of them getting to a
final
against a lower league team again and messing up were pretty slim. But there was definitely a sense of, oh, okay, but maybe we just needed to wait for that to happen. And that's a future episode. For any younger listeners, for the record, I would dearly love to only win a league title. I'll take that to anyone that's offering, if that's okay. Listen, guys, I think we've done well there. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. More enjoyable than expected, and yes, I think we would all accept 7th title in a row is a bit bland.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I think it's important to cut through the kind of downbeat approach that we maybe came to this episode with. We were watching Brian Laudrup.
Yeah.
You know, there's something in it.
No, there absolutely always was. But I think we have captured what the time was like in Scottish football. I can't get over to you enough, and over to listeners enough, sorry. This constant navel-gazing, this real despondency and worry that what Laudrup represented was that something that Scottish football certainly thought of itself as producing, or used to be able to produce, and it had lost that. And perhaps somewhat poignant that as Scotland pondered its place in the game, its last true footballing artist decided to retire. Davy Cooper was never slow throughout the end of his career to complain about the kind of fare that was being dished up for the paying public. He often likened matches he just played in as war rather than sport, where skill and expression were subjugated by physicality and fear. Approaching 39, it was time now, whilst back at his first club, Clydebank, to hang up his boots. "My appetite hasn't gone," he said. "I still love the game, but I'm not able to do the things I did before. It's time to make way for a younger player." Given that Cooper was about to start filming an STV football training series for kids called Shoot, a new chapter in his career was expected to open up. Positive news then, that this particular voice, whether through coaching or punditry, could still be heard in a national game that badly needed to listen to it. For it to be lost immediately wouldn't simply be a shame, it would be a tragedy. Until next week, bye for now.